of Iwo Jima. The ferocious combat. The snapshot that became one of the most iconic images of war ever captured. It's an image we've seen many times, but few have seen Iwo Jima like this. Actual footage from the battle in high-definition color, with a view that is up close and never blinks. This footage is the legacy of a combat cameraman named Bill Janoust. He would not survive the battle, and his death would be mired in controversy. But his 23 reels of film capture a time and a place that are etched forever in the American memory. Now, for the first time, the story of Iwo Jima can be seen through his eyes and his camera. The astonishing story of a forgotten American hero. Somewhere on this small Pacific island, the remains of Marine combat cameraman Bill Janoust lie undisturbed and undiscovered. Entombed here over 60 years ago, Janoust captured an image that captured a nation. But in a twist of tragic irony, he would never know the impact his footage would have then and for decades to follow. By January 1945, as part of a master island hopping campaign, the U.S. is steaming toward its next objective, a craggy volcanic island called Iwo Jima. But to get there, a series of island battles must be won. And once they got past the Gilberts, the Marshalls, and the Marianas, Iwo Jima was next.
Iwo Jima is right there in the interior, the vital part of the Japanese defensive perimeter.
But one single event, more than any other, would come to symbolize the Battle of Iwo Jima. Not the horrific combat, but the moment when the trigger of a shutter would inspire a nation. "5 days into the Battle of Iwo Jima, the Marines are in the thick of it.
As one Marine put it, if there is a hell, it must be like Iwo Jima.
On Iwo's southern tip, a tactically important feature, the dormant volcano, Mount Suribachi, a peak that can be seen for miles around. And the Japanese are hidden within, taking aim on Americans below.
If you're atop Suribachi, you can rake over anything, especially the beaches. So you'd better get it, and you'd better get it pretty quickly.
With the battle raging, a U.S. flag appears atop the volcano's jagged rim. 5 Marines and a Navy corpsman plant the makeshift flagstaff in the fractured rock and begin to make history. Capturing the moment is civilian photographer Joe Rosenthal. He snaps a black and white photograph, what is now arguably the most famous war image ever shot. The photo would appear on stamps, posters, and magazine covers, and earn Joe a Pulitzer Prize and lifelong fame. But someone else is standing alongside Rosenthal when the flag goes up. He's shooting 16mm color motion picture film. He's Marine Sergeant William H. Janoust. there will be no fame or fortune for this photographer. His name will be lost in military red tape and historical obscurity. The photo of the flag raising would become a timeless image, the motion picture forgotten to time. Just 9 days after he filmed the iconic image, Bill Janoust would be dead at age 38. 4 years earlier, war is the furthest thing from Bill Janoust's mind, and he isn't alone.
1941 America, you did have people going about their lives quietly, living their lives as they always had. They were pleased that the economy was picking up a little bit because it had been a rough decade, the 1930s, the Great Depression.
Bill is busy carving out a slice of his own American dream in Minneapolis, Minnesota. His hobby is taking pictures. Then Ford Motor Company offers him a chance to turn his hobby into his living. They give him a job as plant photographer, taking executive portraits and assembly line photos. He has a wife, Adelaide, and together they live in a little brick house in the suburbs.
Not many people were able to buy houses, you know, back in that era.
Ron Hansen is Bill's nephew. Ron remembers his uncle through the eyes of a 10-year-old boy.
What I thought about him was that he was just a cut above the average person. You know, you can tell when somebody walks in the room and they have confidence and class. And I was too young to know what class was, but he had it.
Married for 15 years, Bill and Adelaide share a love of the outdoors. Here, a photo taken on a hunting trip.
I really do believe, you know, that they had a fantastic marriage. It was strong, and they were in love. You could see that.
But soon, their lives are turned upside down.
It was pretty clear most people wanted in on the war and they wanted payback against the Japanese as soon as possible in that very impatient American way.
Bill Janoust is a patriot. He's also 36 years old. And for more than 18 months, Bill would look for a way to get in on the war, with no luck.
You almost felt guilty in my town, because everybody knew everybody, about not serving. What's wrong with him, you know? Is he kind of a blackguard or what, you know? Adelaide knew how disappointed he was that he couldn't get in the service.
Late one night, Adelaide hears a radio ad.
The United States Marine Corps is on the air.
The Marines are looking for combat photographers to film the action. She can't believe her ears.
When she heard that, she thought, well, because of his abilities, you know, that might carry him.
Adelaide wakes Bill and tells him the news. It's the opportunity he's been looking for. The next morning, Bill Janoust joins the Marine Corps. Bill had set out to fight, but he would achieve more with a camera than he ever would with a gun. By the summer of '43, Bill Janoust is a Marine regular, receiving cinematography training in Quantico, Virginia. And by the time Bill Janoust points his camera toward war, cameramen are well trained. But it didn't start out that way.
We finally got a photo section organized and got some more people in. And some of them were already trained in still photography, but nobody knew anything about motion pictures.
In 1943, Norm Hatch is a Marine Corps staff sergeant. And in the months that follow, he would become Janoust's boss. Hatch was one of a few men picked early on to receive motion picture camera training.
This was all brand spanking new. Nobody had ever done this before in the American military, and we were making it up as we went along.
Until now, 35mm black and white was standard issue. But the camera and its gear are bulky and heavy. So Hatch proposes to purchase a more combat-friendly camera.
I convinced the warrant officer and the supply officer that it'd be a good idea if we picked up some 16mm cameras.
It's a suggestion that would revolutionize combat photography.
The minute we saw this, there was no question in our minds that this is what the guys ought to have.
This is the 16mm Bell & Howell Autoload silent motion picture camera. It weighs less than 3 pounds, and Norm discovered that it uses easy-to-load 50-foot film cassettes. Color film cassettes. In the 1940s, that is a big deal.
The camera was almost indestructible, and it didn't seem to get bothered by too much dirt or sand or anything along that line.
Norm would snap up all these cameras he could find. The lightweight camera would be what Bill Janoust would eventually take into combat. The war that was unfolding would be one of the most filmed conflicts ever.
I like to think it's fitting because it's really the monumental event in human history.
Yet at the front, it seems strange to devote so much manpower to movies.
They'd say, "What are you doing up here? You don't have to be here." You know, and I say, "Yes, I do." I said, "My camera is just as important as your rifle."
Here's why. Families would go to the movies, waiting in line for hours. But it wasn't the Hollywood feature they came to see. Instead, it was the newsreels showing the latest images from the war.
The impact of the newsreels on the home front was considerable. The population at that time was 130 million people. Every week, between 60 and 100 million people went to the theaters.
Viewers were gripped by the war footage.
There was always the hope, fleeting though it may be, that you could glimpse your loved one, and that could keep you going for weeks. If you thought you saw him, it was a kind of a connection there, remote though it may be.
And the Marine Corps, more than any other part of the service, understands the power of imagery to hone and shape public attitudes toward the war.
It was an era of mass media. Electronic media with radio, and of course with moving pictures in the theater, which all leads to this ability to document this huge event that spans every corner of the globe.
Soon, Janoust will do his part at documenting this war. But Norm Hatch will get there first. His assignment, a tiny atoll called Tarawa. This battle will put this new camera to the test and give a glimpse of what Bill Janoust can soon expect. For the first time in the Pacific Theater, Marines experience heavy resistance, and the invasion quickly goes from bad to worse. The Higgins boats they are in snag on a reef.
So we all had to go over the side.
Hatch and his assistant, Bill Kelleher, load themselves down with camera gear and jump in up to their chins.
I told Kelly, I said, "If you fall down and get that camera wet, I'm going to kill you." The main thing in my mind was to get to the beach with the film and the camera safe.
With more than 35,000 men jammed in a space a third of the size of Central Park, Hatch found himself filming some of the most up-close combat views ever seen, including a historic first: attacker and defender in the same motion picture shot.
And we had a machine gunner laying down right here, and somebody said, "Here come the Japs." I just turned my body, and I had framed right in the bottom the machine gunner, and right across is the Japanese, and they're firing it.
The fighting lasts 3 days. It leaves nearly 1,000 Marines and 4,000 Japanese dead by the time the island of Tarawa is secure. An era of close-up war has begun. The footage is quickly edited into a documentary called With the Marines at Tarawa and hurried into theaters.
The island is infested with buried pillboxes, many of them still crawling with Japs.
It was a very, very important film because it was the beginning of the war, really. It was released to the public, and as I said, it went to 16,000 theaters, and that was it. And we had a standing joke. We said, we're going to win an Academy Award. Now, what chance did we have?
When the 1945 Academy Awards are announced for Best Documentary Short Subject, it was no joke.
So what happens? We got the Academy Award.
Tarawa reveals the power of film and a sense of the horrific battles still to come. This is the fury Bill Janoust is about to enter. Throughout 1943 and 1944, the Marines engage in a series of marine attacks on fortified Pacific islands, most of them geographically insignificant, but strategically urgent.
When people ask me why the Americans invade certain islands in the Pacific War, the answer is usually there's an airfield there. The projection of air power in the Pacific War was of paramount importance for the simple reason that airplanes were deadly to ships.
Each island would have to be pried from the hands of Japanese defenders who preferred death to surrender. Next, in June 1944, would be another island no one had ever heard of, Saipan. It would be Bill Janoust's first assignment.
The Americans knew that the Japanese would fight to the death no matter where and when the Americans were going to fight them. By the time the Americans hit Saipan, they know that full well. And there's an expectation among the troops that you're just going to have to exterminate these guys.
This battle is going to be close up, testing the mettle of those shooting a gun and of the dozen or so men shooting film.
If you're coming ashore on Saipan, you got to know that almost every square foot of water or beach, the Japanese have pre-sighted it. And of course, what it means to you on June 15th is death lurks everywhere.
And it is here that we first see the war through Bill's lens. He would film on Saipan for a month, but only 3 reels survive today. The rest lost to the vagaries of war. But in these 3 reels, a sense of what Marines will have to endure. Janoust's first reel gives a glimpse of men and machines preparing to engage the enemy. The Japanese are there, hidden in the bush, and Janoust captures the trepidation of war. The Marines advance, and Janoust reveals the terror of men trying to stay alive. He has a surprisingly steady hand for a first attempt at shooting war. Then, long stretches of mundane life. Janoust, the cameraman, shows an eye for the absurd. The Marines here seem to be making the most of a stowed sewing machine. Mending torn pants, no doubt. But the real absurdity was just beginning.
It becomes just a slugging match. An ugly, brutal, bloody slugging match all the way up the neck of the island. It's about hilltop fighting and dealing with taking ridges and just kind of incrementally advancing that way.
Americans are also forced to do battle against deplorable Japanese tactics. Lies are spread among civilians about what the Americans will do to them and their children, driving them to suicide. On the edge of a cliff, Janoust's colleague Johnny Urkel captures one of the most disturbing shots of World War II.
Urkel caught that image of a Japanese woman hurling herself off a cliff into the sea. This is a woman hurling herself off a cliff. The Americans didn't come to the Pacific War to see that. They came to fight the average Japanese soldier.
A few weeks into the battle, the fighting grows more intense. Bill Janoust would have to put down his camera and pick up his rifle. Late one afternoon, Janoust and fellow cameraman Howard McClue are ambushed by an enemy platoon. The two men quickly take cover, but are outnumbered. McClue leaves to get help. Bill stays put and fights for his life, fending off the attack. When McClue returns with reinforcements, he's hundreds of feet from where Janoust is hunkered down. As Bill stands to direct the offensive, he takes a bullet in the thigh. But not before he single-handedly kills 9 Japanese snipers. As the Marines mop up Saipan, Janoust is sent to a hospital in Hawaii to recover. It's here he learns of the death of his close friend, and then drafts the hardest letter he would ever write. It's addressed to the mother of his friend, Howard McClue. McClue was killed the night Janoust was wounded, taking a bullet in the heart minutes after Bill had been evacuated. Very few of Bill Janoust's letters survive. This one speaks volumes to his eloquence. Dear Mrs. McClue, you probably know that Howard shipped out with me, and that we were in very close contact from the time we left Quantico until his death on Saipan. His passing has taken something from me which can never be regained. He was laid to rest with full military honors in the presence of his sorrowing friends and buddies. Sincerely, Bill Janoust. It would take 8 months for Bill Janoust to recover from his Saipan wounds. During this time, the island hopping campaign has reached its first objective on Japanese soil. A tiny volcanic speck in the Pacific called Iwo Jima. As land, it is worthless. Its water, undrinkable. Its position, isolated. So why Iwo Jima? The answer, it has 2 vital airstrips.
Iwo Jima would be desperately needed to get fighter airstrips to go escort the bombers, but we also need Iwo Jima as an emergency landing place for B-29 bombers that are stricken when they're coming back from Japan.
Taking Iwo Jima would be harder than anyone imagined. And of course, it will be filmed. Norm Hatch is tasked with preparing a team of cameramen and immediately notices Janoust.
It was great that he showed up because he was a staff sergeant and helped us train the rest of the unit on how to be worthwhile in photography in the combat zone. And he was an older man. In fact, he was a lot older than I was. I was only 24.
Janoust is nominated for the Navy Cross for his heroism on Saipan. But just prior to Iwo Jima, he would receive disappointing news.
They had turned him down for the Navy Cross, and one of the reasons that they had turned him down was that he was a cameraman and not an infantryman. When I saw that, I almost fell off my chair.
Janoust took the news in his usual self-effacing manner. As a consolation, Bill receives the Bronze Star. Because of his wounds, Bill Janoust had an out. He was given an offer to go home if he wanted. After being told the Navy didn't consider him a real infantryman, just a cameraman, no one would have blamed Bill for leaving the war.
He could have gone home. The colonel wanted to send him home, but he didn't want to go home. He wanted to stay.
It was a crucial moment. Janoust rose above the slide and volunteered to film and fight the unimaginably dangerous mission on Iwo Jima. On February of 1945, a massive armada of U.S. warships steams toward Iwo Jima, carrying Marines and Marine cameramen, including Bill Janoust.
This is the largest operation we've been in, 3 divisions, pretty close to 70,000 men involved, you know? And on top of that, there are likely to be 60 some odd cameramen between the 3 divisions.
Those cameramen will ride in with the infantrymen in landing craft. This is the very first shot of the first known reel filmed by Bill Janoust at Iwo Jima. Two mushroom clouds over Mount Suribachi, from almost the very spot where the flag will be raised. These are called ducks, amphibious tanks, but the Marines on it seem more interested in Bill's camera. Bill changes reels. His handwritten slates record day and location. Bill zooms in to capture the bombardment of the island. The barrage is designed to clear Japanese resistance and allow for a clean landing.
The bombardment pretty much destroys most of their above-ground defenses. It denudes Suribachi of much of any kind of vegetation so that you have better eyes on exactly what the terrain looks like. So the bombardment is important and it is effective, but only to a certain extent.
The beach landings are supposed to be easy, but the bombardment is only successful in ringing the ears of the enemy. They are still positioned to return fire. The beach invasion quickly dissolves into a nightmare, with Bill Janoust in the middle of it. Janoust is about to hit the beach and shoot 3 of the most amazing reels of film in American history. Embedded with the Marines' 4th Division, Janoust trains his camera on these stunned Marines, pinned on the beach with no place to hide. Although the film is silent, the intensity is deafening. In the chaos, Janoust mislates his next reel, then has the presence of mind to correct himself. The sand's texture is like running in quicksand. Feet and vehicles alike sink straight down, slowing progress. To Janoust's left, Mount Suribachi burns. Janoust catches the next wave of Marines coming in and finds shelter in a foxhole. For the next several minutes, Janoust films by sticking his camera over his head out of the foxhole. Each reel of film lasts just 4 short minutes. No known footage of Janoust on Iwo Jima exists, but here, a glimpse of his boots. After the landings, Janoust shoots only 2 reels of film in the next 2 days. He most likely had to turn back into an infantryman because the battle for Iwo was going downhill fast. Key to the American offensive is to quiet the deadly hail of artillery erupting from Mount Suribachi.
The beach is under fire from practically every direction, but especially from Suribachi. For a long time at Iwo Jima, nothing is really secure and everything's under fire.
Mount Suribachi is a maze of caves and interconnecting tunnels, with thousands of Japanese firing from within. Mount Suribachi must be conquered or the battle for Iwo Jima and perhaps the war against Japan will be lost. Perhaps sensing history, Bill Janoust sticks close to Suribachi. He's teamed with still photographer Bob Campbell.
Bill had a roving assignment along with Campbell, and I wanted them to watch out whatever might happen on Suribachi.
And on D-Day +2, 3 days into the battle, Bill Janoust starts his 11th reel of film. It begins at the command post near the base of Mount Suribachi. A tank trains its sights on the volcano. Marines treat an injured Japanese flushed out of a cave. At the base of Suribachi, a destroyed Japanese artillery gun. It's now 5 days into the battle, and a group of Marines decides to take the Suribachi situation into their own hands. A small platoon from E Company heads for Suribachi's jagged peak with a flag in hand. This is beyond risky. Suribachi is still in Japanese hands and is still raining artillery on American positions. There is no reason for a handful of Marines to try to do something as tactically insignificant as fly a flag at its top. Janoust's colleague, Marine photographer Lou Lowry, captures the climb with his black and white still camera. The Marines have to fight for every foothold. Once on top, a flag is raised, and Lou Lowry snaps a photo. It's a triumphant moment. For the first time in the war, a U.S. flag is raised on Japanese soil.
It's important because it represents the fact that maybe we're winning and there will be an end soon. Unfortunately, a lot of guys took it the wrong way. When they saw the flag go up, one of the reasons they're cheering so much is saying, well, battle's over, we won. Cool, this is good. Well, unfortunately, it was only the beginning.
The shot Lou Lowry captured told the story of an island battle on the verge of conquest.
It is more typical of what a combat zone would be, especially that rifleman that you see right there in the foreground, and the angle is very interesting. It's almost like you're in that lower post right near him and you're looking up, and the tension on that guy's face is unmistakable.
Lowry was pleased with this photo, but at the base of Suribachi, Bill Janoust had no clue that the next filming opportunity would be his, and the image he captures would become historic. When the 4th Marine Division slams ashore on Iwo's black volcanic sand, with them is Associated Press photographer Joe Rosenthal. Rosenthal tried to enlist when the war broke out, but was denied.
He had very poor eyesight, and you can see it. He has some pretty thick glasses. When you see pictures of him, you can see that. But being the kind of person he was, he wanted to cover the war, and he certainly could do that as a civilian reporter photographer.
When he heard the Marines were going to raise a flag on Suribachi, Joe hightailed it toward the mountain. Unbeknownst to him, Joe will be late for the first flag raising, but he'll get another chance.
When the first flag went up, Colonel George Roll, who was my boss, he was the intelligence officer, he came to me, he said, Norm, he said, General's not happy with that flag. He says, it's too small, nobody can see it. He said, they're going to put up another one. And I said, Colonel, tell me how. I said, where are they going to find a bigger flag? I mean, we're fighting down there.
One reason the general wanted a larger flag, the presence on shore of a VIP, Navy Secretary James Forrestal.
I do think Forrestal's presence is one of the reasons why the powers that be, or the brass or whatever, wants a flag up there that's big enough for everyone to see and is big enough to make the statement that everyone wants it to make.
Whatever the reason, Norm Hatch's boss issues an order.
But he said, I'd recommend that you get a still man and a movie man up there because it may be considered the official flag raising for the island. So I said, I haven't got anybody here. All my cameramen were out doing their job. So 15 minutes or 20 minutes later, who walks in but Bill Janoust and Bob Campbell? So I said, well, you guys are a godsend. Once you get your camera squared away and get right back to the mountain, because there's going to be another flag raising. But I said, don't talk about it, because you get everybody excited. We don't know. I don't know whether there's going to be a flag up there, but be there in case there is one.
By now, Janoust and Campbell meet Rosenthal at the base of Suribachi. The mountain isn't secure, so the three men join the remaining platoon and start the 556-foot climb.
So when Rosenthal and group started up, they ran into Lou Lowry coming down, and Lowry said, oh, the flag's up already, but it's nice up there, you get a good view of everything, and you might as well go up as long as you started.
Of course, Lowry had no idea a second flag was on order. And here is where Janoust starts filming. Reel number 12, Suribachi. It starts with two very quick shots of a handful of Marines headed uphill. Then a grenade explodes in a hole. A tense Marine looks around. Looking uphill again, Janoust films two Marines dropping a charge into a cave. For the next shot, a Marine scrambles into the foreground, drops a charge, and runs. Reel 12 ends. Janoust reloads. This will be reel 13. As they approach the top, the first flag is flying.
Just as they get up there, they find the second flag is ready to go up. And so then they begin to scramble around to find, a place to shoot the pictures. Bill Janoust on the left side, and just as the flag was about to go up, he moved across, and as he got just past Rosenthal, said, it's going up, it's going up. So he turned around and shot it, and he got it frame-wise all the way up.
Janoust captured the simple action of men raising a flag. It would never be as iconic as the still photo, but it would be critical in squashing a firestorm of controversy. Routinely, camera rolls and still negatives are shipped out for processing daily. Motion picture to Pearl Harbor and photos to Guam. This day would be no different.
The film that Rosenthal shot was flown back to Guam. It got back there probably the same day it was shot, was processed that day.
By contrast, Bill Janoust's 16mm footage would take nearly 10 days to be processed. For Joe Rosenthal, the quick turnaround thrusts him into stardom and relentless controversy well before he or anyone else on Iwo knew it.
We're fed radio accounts of whatever news was being broadcast about what we were doing in the fighting. And they started talking about this terrific picture of the flag raising. We all looked at each other. What the hell are they talking about? Terrific picture, flag raising? So this piqued the curiosity of Lou Lowry.
Lou Lowry had taken the image of the first flag raising.
He couldn't understand why a second photo going up would get all this acclaim. And he was a little upset about it. He said, something's wrong with this. He said, that's got to be a phony picture of some sort. He said, I can't believe it. And by that time, other people, even in the industry, were calling it a phony picture because they believed it was a setup. They believed Rosenthal set that picture up.
Suddenly, this one image becomes a subject of scrutiny. Norm left the fighting on Iwo for Pearl Harbor, where he was called into the commandant's office.
And he said, Gunner, he said, tell me, what is the story about the two flags? Well, I told him the story, and I said, the second flag was put up because the first one was too small, and I said, I sent two people up to cover a second flag raising, not knowing there was going to be one, actually, but Bill Janoust staff sergeant, one of my photographers, was up there and shot right alongside of Rosenthal. And I said, he's got motion pictures of it.
Bill's 16mm footage, shot standing side by side with Rosenthal, clearly shows it was not a staged photo op.
So I think it was a product of two things: ignorance and cynicism. The ignorance of those who didn't know what actually went on, and the cynicism of those who simply assumed that such an image, well, it must be staged, it must be manipulated by some puppet master in the Office of War Information or wherever else. This couldn't have actually happened. Well, indeed it did.
And the images are unlike any before it.
Well, you see the guy straining to get it up. It was heavy. You see this in the way the hands are, and the way the guys are focused, the way they're bent down, and the creases in their trousers, and all of that.
FDR saw the image, and he knew it was definitely gold, publicity gold.
Roosevelt used the still image as a symbol for the 7th War Bond Drive. Within weeks, Bill Janoust's strip of film is seen in movie houses across the country. And for the men fighting for their lives on Iwo, Old Glory gives them the hope of victory. But Bill Janoust would never see the fruits of his labor, because 9 days from now, he would be dead. It was supposed to be a quick and decisive operation. But the battle for control of Iwo Jima would drag on for 36 days. It would be the bloodiest in Marine Corps history, in part because it is contained on an inescapable island.
The Japanese tend to kind of fragment and have these dangerous little pockets of them hanging around in caves or whatever else, determined to fight to the end.
Of the 21,000 Japanese defending the island, nearly all are killed. And for the Americans, nearly 7,000 dead and 20,000 wounded before the fighting has ended. Bill Janoust is now off Suribachi. The mountaintop is secure, but the rest of the island is far from it. On Reel 14, Bill's eye for the absurd catches up. This is definitely not Weehawken, New Jersey. Next, the focus shifts from combat to aftermath and dead Japanese. By now, the first airfield has been taken. Janoust's footage shows it being repaired and readied for action. The first crippled B-29 will land on it before the battle is even over. But Iwo Jima is still a nightmare of death for both sides. The American forces have control of the island, but can't seem to seal the deal. The reason? The extensive tunnel fortifications.
All these positions that they thought they had, especially the first 5, 6, 7 days, are going to be reoccupied until the Americans get a little more savvy on the whole cave network and begin to take action. It's subterranean creatures against terrestrial creatures at that point. How do you fight that? You've got to get down and flame them out.
February 27th, D+8. Reel 15 starts with a poignant shot. A silhouette of Marines carrying a dead comrade from the battlefield. Then, caring for the wounded. A corpsman marks an injured Marine as urgent in pencil. Reel 16, more death. A dead Marine is brought by on a litter. the Marines around barely seemed to notice anymore. Janoust takes a couple of panoramic shots of the battlefield and the beach he landed on 8 days earlier. And on March 1st, Bill Janoust's footage turns to the endgame of the Battle of Iwo Jima, digging out the last Japanese resistance. Reel 22 starts with dogs. But this isn't whimsical, like the cow on Saipan. These are tracking dogs, used to sniff out the Japanese in caves. Japanese soldiers would hide quietly, and when an American patrol stuck their heads in, they would be cut down by surprise. Hence, the dogs. March 2nd, 1945. Bill Janoust loads up reel 23. It would be the last reel of film he would ever shoot. It would be telling. On his left hand, the wedding ring Adelaide had given him 17 years earlier. The reel depicts the Marines' cave-by-cave effort to pry out the last Japanese resistance. It shows how dangerous and uninviting these caves are. Janoust's final shots. A Japanese prisoner pulled from a cave and given treatment and water. For 2 days it rained, so Janoust put down his camera. As fate would have it, he would never pick up his camera again. March 4th, 1945. 9 days after capturing the image of the flag raising on Mount Suribachi, Bill Janoust is on patrol with the 28th Marines as they advance on Hill 362A.
He was on a patrol as a curiosity. He was looking for things to shoot the next day because it was misty on this particular day.
Bill's unit comes upon a cave entrance. Exactly what happens next is cloaked in ambiguity. Accounts from men who were there differ, but all agree that Bill, with flashlight in hand, entered the cave to have a look around.
So Bill goes in, and is about 2/3 of the way down, and a machine gun opens up. It shot him and it killed him.
It was too dangerous for Marines to go in after him. They retaliate with hand grenades and flamethrowers and seal the cave entrance shut. This was Marine Corps policy in an effort to combat the tunnel fortifications. Subsequent search and recovery missions days later turned up empty. The exact location of the cave could not be found. The battle for Iwo Jima would continue for 25 more days. The island was officially declared liberated on March 23rd, 1945. Within the next 5 months, the world changes dramatically. FDR dies. The Germans surrender. And 2 atomic bombs finally bring World War II to an end. Bill's wife, Adelaide, who had convinced him to be a combat cameraman, received the notice of Bill's death by telegram. Then, months later, she received another letter. It was from Bill. He wrote about how he missed her, how for the first time he could see himself coming home. It was going to be all right. Sorrow turned to anger. She destroyed the letter. It would be the last letter she would ever receive from Bill. The flag raising that inspired the nation would haunt Adelaide for years to come.
At the end of every movie, they'd play that flag going and maybe Star Spangled Banner or something. She just quit going to movies because that got her. And the same with when television came along years later. A lot of people don't know this, but when they shut the TV stations down, there was the flags.
Now, more than 60 years later, JPAC, the Joint POW MIA Accounting Command, tasked with looking for Americans lost during conflict, has tried to locate the remains of Bill Janoust on 2 occasions. Most recently, in July of 2008. But to no avail. Ron Hansen believes they should leave him at rest.
He's gone, you know. We know where he is, and I suppose it'd be something if they found his remains and then his dog tags and his camera and his weapons. They'd still be there. But to what avail, you know?
Iwo Jima is now a closed Japanese military base, and Bill Janoust remains to this day where he died. Bill Janoust's life may have ended on that island, but his legacy lives on in the images he filmed. The bloody battles of a world at war. The poignant faces of men poised for combat, and of those with the scars of battle etched deep into their souls.